Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 126 of Teaching Tales, the podcast totally devoted to sharing stories and hopefully inspiration from the world of education. I am Brent Coley, your host, an educator in beautiful and currently very rainy Southern California. And joining me today, Sue Thotz. Sue, how are you today?
Enjoying this rain and the cold and the wind.
I'm with you. Speaking as a lifelong Southern Californian, it's like I like the rain because it doesn't happen all the time. I probably wouldn't have the same feelings if I was living in Portland or Seattle or something like that. But we need it.
We need it. And I think, growing up as a Midwesterner, I have immense guilt over not enjoying and squeezing at the drop out of every single beautiful, gorgeous Southern California day that we have here. So a day like this is guilt-free for being inside all day.
That's right. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited about the chat. We're going to talk a little AI today. But before, I have seen you, as we talked, what was it, about a month ago, I've seen you speak many times at conferences in Southern California, and I saw you speak. You keynoted a recent AI one-day mini conference, which it was awesome. It's like, I need to, please be on my podcast. And you're like, yes, let's do it. So I'm so excited that we get to talk and I get to share our conversation with everybody. But before we jump in, I'm familiar with you and your work. But for those who may not be, tell listeners, my dad, who's listening right now, who is Sue? What does Sue do? What is Sue passionate about?
Oh, a lot of things. I guess I'll just start with like my job. Let's start there. Professionally, I work for an organization called Common Sense Media, and we're a nonprofit organization that's been around shy of 25 years, and I've been there for about 15 of those years. And a lot of what we do is try to help parents, families, educators guide kids in this world full of media and technology. And so we try to do some research and some advocacy in terms of what we can do to best make our kids healthy and happy and productive and, good members of society. We also have a full curriculum, K through 12 curriculum around, how to use technology well in your life. So digital well-being stuff, digital literacy, AI literacy, and all kinds of content to really get kids to connect with each other and to be thoughtful and mindful about the world they live in and the way that they use tech. So that's what I do professionally. And I get to run around the country and work with districts and educators and, share this free content curriculum with them as much as they need. So that's all the good stuff. I get to do it. I get to do the things that I like doing and work with people I enjoy.
I love it. And get paid doing it. It's great when you get to do and you get paid for what you love to do. And Common Sense is, like you said, it's been around for 25 years or so. My oldest daughter is 25. And I know just as a parent, we used it as my two kids were growing up, just in terms of, is this movie appropriate? I mean, just for movie, as simple as movie reviews, but it's so much more than that in terms of the digital citizenship and all of the lesson plans and stuff like that. So there's such good stuff. At the end of the broadcast, I'll have you share like how people can connect with you and with the organization and all the resources that you provide, because it's good. I can personally speak. It's good stuff. So thank you for all of your work with that. So AI. When you were keynoting the other day, and I loved what you were talking about, and we were talking before we started recording that this is a conversation that is being had. It seems, especially in education, it's being had. Well, everywhere it's being had, but in education, this is a conversation being had in my hallway. It's being had with our superintendent and senior cabinet, because there's a lot of questions. And as you said before we started recording, not necessarily a lot of answers. Mm-hmm. So, and you had shared, like, in terms of secondary education, you've got I think your daughter is in college. And
I have a daughter and a son in college.
Oh boy. And you talked about some experiences about like what they're telling you about. So I'm just going to pass it to you. Like, let's just start the conversation and share your story like about that.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we live in this space where we have a lot of conversations, and folks are asking us about our thoughts around, which AI tools to use and whether we want to see AI in classrooms and with what ages and with what restrictions. And, this is a lot. People are grappling with like, what kind of guidance do we want to provide for our families and for our teachers when it comes to AI use? And how do we help kids learn in an age when answers are so freely available? All right. How do you help kids grapple with some of these questions and use their brains to dive deep and create and connect and do all these things that we as educators feel is so important when the answers are just right there in the palm of their hand a lot of times, right? You can just have a robot make stuff up for you and turn that in and done, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of way we have designed the spaces that that our phones and that our computers take up. But, I have a son. I said my son is a sophomore in college. He's a film student, and he's taking a humanities course right now, right? He's an excellent writer. He's an excellent communicator. He loves to think and argue and debate, and he's a verbal social kid. I wonder where he gets it.
Yeah.
I was watching him, grapple with some of these questions that, he's reading, it's some, he's reading like like ancient, well, classics, right? He was reading some classics and they were asking him questions about, analyzing these classics. And these are questions that you could easily ask your AI companion and see what your AI companion spits back out at you and stuff. And so I could tell that I know that he's thought about this. He's read these texts and he's thought about it. And then, he's asking the AI for some advice here and there, but clearly some of this is coming from his classrooms. And then, so he turns in these papers that I've read and I could tell he spent time on them, but there's also a little language in there that seems a little polished, right? Like I know he's trying to sound better. And
Sure.
so, then when he gets it back from his TA, the TA has feedback on there that also very much sounds like AI
Sure.
language, right? It sounds like my bot is making something and then your bot is like
It's
refining. So,
respondy.
yes. And it sounds like the bots are talking to each other. And I'm just like, I am paying, $40,000 a year,
Yeah.
these two bots to talk to each other. Really? Is this what's going on in this
Hmm.
space? But, so that's where I'm just like, I know my kid is learning. I know he's using some of these tools in the right way, but what are we expecting as parents, as educators, when kids are in this space, when teachers are in this space, we're all trying to be more efficient, but, what are we looking for when it comes to the ways that we're using AI for learning, especially in a secondary space or, even in our high school classrooms?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's you when you were saying the classic. Were you going to say the Odyssey? Were you-
He did not read the Odyssey. He wrote
Okay.
something else, but yes, it was very Odyssey-like. Yeah.
Which, as you were saying that, and as you had messaged me when we were talking about what we could chat about in this conversation, is my daughter recently graduated college with her master's, and she's adjunct teaching a class right now, a freshman writing class and a literature class where she's teaching the Odyssey, which is why
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh. But similar to what you with with your child is experiencing, like bot talking to another, I've talked with my daughters, like, so how are you seeing it from like the professor side of it now? Like you were on the student side literally a year ago. Now you're on the other side of it from in a higher education setting. And she said it's a struggle, especially with some of, not everybody, but she's saying, like, especially with her freshman writing class, where some of them are kind of like what you were describing, where it's like the what we would call probably appropriate use, where it's like I'm using it for some ideas, but then I'm going to synthesize it, make it my own, and stuff like that. But she said then there's others who it's like you can tell for the last couple of years they became dependent on this technology, and there's like she said very little evidence of, like you said, this doesn't sound like you, like
Yeah.
so
I, I think like, if I were in a high school classroom today, what are some of the ways that I would be instructing how to be a good writer, right? Am I going to say, absolutely, I do not want to even think about any of you using AI tools whatsoever? Where are we going to be? Like, I guess part of it is like, I want to create a low pressure environment where it's okay to fail, right? Where we're going to practice failing over and over and over again. We're practicing. That's what we're doing in my classroom is I want to create a space where it's okay for us to practice writing in a way that we have some sort of genuine audience here in this space with each other as peers. And then, but it's scary. It's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to write something, especially when I don't think I'm good at it, when I'm terrible at this.
Yeah.
But how do we get better without being embarrassed? Or how do we get better at math without putting ourselves out there in this way? Right. And the thing about these robots and the thing about all this AI is like there's no reason to be embarrassed in front of them. Right. They have no judgment on us.
Yeah.
And so how do we, create that space in classrooms that allows us as teachers and as educators and as students and as people who are all learning together to learn in a way where it's okay to be embarrassed. It's okay to, to fail, right? And to just try things out.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
It's, yeah, like you were saying, I wish we had the magic wand, the silver bullet that could just like magically answer all these questions. I think it's coming down to, like you said, if it was your classroom, if it was my classroom, I think a lot of it comes down to, and this is way easier said than done, but we have to redefine the learning tasks of what we're asking kids to do and how we're asking them to prove their learning, because the old ways, like you said, it's so readily available. You don't even have to pick up your phone now. You can just, I don't want to say the Alexa out loud because she's sitting on my desk right here listening to me and she'll respond. But I just have to ask. We're in Star Trek days where if we're using the same assignments, an English teacher is using the same assignment that he or she has used I was going to say 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Honestly, even 1 year ago, it's probably, you're almost inviting the use of something like that. So again, I don't have the perfect answer, but I know that you at least have to ask ourselves the question, could this be done independent of AI? Or could AI assist but not carry the entire load? And I think that's the key. We have to students still have to think.
I think part of this is like creating a lot of reps, right? Just like we would do in a math class and, same with like writing class. And I know this is not your daughter's, she's at a college level, but maybe at a middle school level or English, at a high school level, thinking about like, do you remember a long time ago, there was an ed tech tool called Subtext or like Light Sail, where you'd be reading something and then I, as a teacher, could take a little passage and say, what do you think the narrator meant by this, this, this? Or what kind of symbolism do you see in this? And like kids would respond within the text. Yeah. And then the next day in class, the teacher would be able to see all of their responses. But once they couldn't see other people's responses, other classmates' responses, until they themselves have answered an answer. And so it's almost like little tiny writing assignments, right? That all of your peers can see. So there's motivation to actually write something that's good, right? Because everybody else is going to like see your answer eventually, yeah. But you're accountable for that answer. And then you're just doing these little tiny responses within, while you're all reading a text together. Or, I saw a tool recently called Short Answer, where, there is a prompt that a teacher is writing, and then all of the students are asked to respond to that prompt in, maybe it's like, what's your favorite fruit and why, or something. Just simple, yeah. Right? It could be as simple, or it can be related to your text that you're reading or whatever. But like kids are practicing their writing skills. And then it kind of comes up battle royale style, where you can pit your students, like their responses against each other.
Right.
And then kids are voting on which response they like better or which one they think is more thorough, or like, here's the rubric that I'm giving you. Students, I want you to be the judge, and you give feedback to each of these responses. So what I like is that, like, those are all creating a genuine audience within your classroom. So students are motivated to not look like a fool. Also, there's low stakes because a lot of times these kids are anonymous to everybody but the teacher, right? So I like that there's genuine audience. It's low stakes. It's practiced writing. It's in response to something, and so it's like, how do you do these short little reps and do them in a way that's meaningful, but also use the technology to get that practice in there, right?
I love that. And
Yeah.
and what you were saying there is the meaningful kept popping up. You said that, but also personal. Like you were saying, like, what's your favorite fruit and why? That's not necessarily, yeah, I'm sure you could ask Gemini or ChatGPT. I mean, and it'll give you something, but that's personal. And when you're making those, and it's like micro prompts or things like that. But when you make it personal, I don't want to say AI proof because that makes it sound like but you know what I mean? It's kind of like, you need to do that by yourself. But I also like, that's not threatening. Like you said, that's a small bite. Like, what's your favorite fruit? What? There's no wrong answer there. I mean, have fun with it. So I like that.
Yeah. So I think that, like, in this age of AI, how are we creating opportunities? In that keynote, I talked about creativity. I talked about human connection. I talked about curiosity and critical thinking, right? Those four skills that we are really trying to, imbue in our classrooms. And how do we create opportunities to practice those four things in a way that invites students to want to participate in those, right? And as a teacher, how do I create the space and the time to help students practice those skills without the huge pressure, right? Of a 10-page essay, right? All in once, right? That's for college, maybe. That's your daughter's job. But in a middle school or a high school classroom, what are the ways I can do this every day?
And I would say even at the college level, like with my daughter, it's kind of like what you described is the type of thing that is going to keep, because just because they're in college, they're still 18. They're still 18. I mean, like these are essentially high school. It's literally their first class in college, their first semester in college. So, and shoot, even if this is a grad program, I would still argue that's the type of thing you should be doing there, because if it's meaningful, if it's engaging, if it's authentic, if it's low stress, why that shouldn't be limited to just middle school or high school. That's just a good instruction.
Yeah. And we know that's not the be all end all, right?
No,
we do know that eventually they have to get to the Odyssey, right? They do have to get to some deeper thinking. They do have to, they have these larger learning objectives where we need them to analyze things more critically. But how do you begin by building that trust, by building that environment, that community in which students are able to really, feel free and exercise those muscles, right? You don't start out with a 10K on the first day, on the first day, we're going to start out with other types of exercises. So, yeah, but I know that's not the answer to everything, but it certainly doesn't mean throwing out all ed tech and just going back to pen and paper, in order to prevent AI from taking over the minds of our kids.
No, I agree. And it was recently, a few months ago, we had in our district, I don't remember, but it was like a student task force, the superintendent student task force. And he brought in from all of our middle schools and all of our high schools, student leaders. From 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade, and talking about AI. And basically, like, it was a very open, and our district leaders and our site leaders just sat in the back and just listened. And it was fascinating because, I jotted down, the overall thing was you had student after student after student basically saying, please teach us how to use it because we already are. Like, and they were very honest. They're like, I'm using it. Like, and there was it was a safe space. It was like, they weren't getting in trouble, but they're like, we're using it. and I want to learn. I don't want it to do all my thinking for me, but the reality is it can do a lot of the thinking for me. So it's like they were almost asking for different types of assignments, but they were also saying like, but I also recognize that I'm a senior and in 4 months, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to be either onto the workforce, onto the military, onto college, applying for jobs, and employers are going to ask me, do I know how to like basically how can we use this to be better humans, to be better students, but also to be better humans? And I think it was so enlightening that they're basically saying we can't just pretend like this isn't a real thing or that it's going away. It's kind of like social media. Think back, what was it, 15, 16 years, like when Twitter was first, it was like, I don't know if it was George Soros or someone said like, it's like water. Do you teach them to avoid it or do you teach them how to swim?
Right.
And I think this is even more important than social. I mean, social media has just been huge, but like this is just as much, if not more, impactful than that. Like it's not going anywhere. Do we teach them to avoid it or do we teach them how to swim?
I had a conversation today with some folks and we were talking about, just general screen time and the backlash that that a lot of school districts and folks are experiencing with the rise of folks not only, pushing cell phone bans, right? And in 35 or 50 states, as well as also seeing a lot of technology, just, like limiting the use of technology in schools. And, what is I don't believe necessarily in the narrative of if you are not actively using AI in your classrooms every day with your students, then that they are missing out on all these things, right? I mean, I say like I'm very much in the center on a lot of these, right? Like I don't necessarily think like what is of course it all comes back to what is your learning objective, what is your intention, what are you actually trying to teach here today, and what is the right format, activity tool like for the job. It doesn't always have to be an ed tech tool. It can be paper, pencil, all kinds of stuff, right? We have many methods of learning, and what is going to be the most effective one for that individual student who has these particular needs today. All right. So for for the argument of taking all technology out of classrooms, that breaks my heart. Thinking about all of the great technology tools that we have used, like you and I have both witnessed and used, for the last how many years, as well as specifically our students who need it for accessibility, who need it for all types of services that they're receiving. Like that's genuinely, scary to me to think about those students losing access in that way. But then, how many times have you also seen technology being used badly?
Poorly, yeah.
The worst. Yeah. The worst. But I've seen a lot of bad teaching in my day too, right? So, it's not like I'm going to, get rid of all teachers either. So, what is the answer and how do we best support our teachers with the kinds of training and, professional development and ideas and time and everything and the resources that they need in order to be able to do the best that they can for the kids that they serve.
Yeah. You said, what's the learning objective? And I think that's like Weston Kieschnick at one point, he said like one of the most dangerous phrases is, what am I going to do with insert piece of technology today? That's not the question. The question is, what do I want my students to learn today? And if a Chromebook can help assist in that, great. If not, great. If it's a paper and pencil, if it's teaching under a tree, taking your kids outside, sometimes I had a principal once who told me like the best teachers can teach under a tree. It's just like, so it's what do I want my kids to learn? If tech can help, great. But if not, don't force it because there is no, for anyone listening, it's like, sorry, we don't have the magic answer at the end of it. Like Sue and I haven't come up with, but I just think honestly, having conversations like this is an answer, or at least it's on the right path to the answer. Is we have to at least be asking ourselves, what is the learning objective? How can it help? How can we help students? Because like you said, it shouldn't be used all the time. And I'm with you. I mean, I love technology, but it's shouldn't be used all the time.
No, we all need a break, right? Everybody needs a break. And a few years ago, I was trying to grapple with the question about, can students learn social emotional skills in a tech-rich classroom? Can we use technology to teach social emotional skills and relationships and connection and stuff? And I ended up, coming up with some ways that we can create a socially and emotionally rich classroom by using, for example, like student response tools, right? Where, for our students who are shy and will not raise their hand or speak loudly in front of a classroom, which is much of it, many of our students and many people I know do not want to be the center of attention, but still need to participate fully in some sort of classroom discussion and activity. The use of education technology has allowed them to participate and be heard and have their thoughts be valued in a classroom, even if they don't necessarily want to stand up in front of 32 kids and proclaim loudly what their thoughts and ideas are. Right. Or at least not, not every single time. Right. Eventually you do want to develop the skill of oracy and, have your students do that in a way. But man, you don't want those students who are quiet to always be left out of the conversation because of the way in which they like to communicate. So I mean, so I'm just thinking about can you make an environment that is responsive to creativity and connection and, curiosity in an AI rich classroom? Or in a classroom where you have the use of all kinds of facets of technology. What does that look like in a classroom? So I don't know. That's if the focus is on the good skills,
And
it
that's
doesn't matter
and
what
I
kind of
think
tech.
and I think ultimately that's coming back to it. When putting a bow on this, I think that's the question. And we just have to keep coming back to putting students at the center. What do I want them to learn? How can I meet their needs, whether they're the shy ones, whether they're the boisterous ones, whatever it is, just just keep asking, just keep being reflective. I'm such a fan of, I know you are too, such a fan of reflection and how can we use whatever tools are at our disposal and they're changing by the day, like literally. How can we, and what's the best tool for the job today? And it might be a different tool tomorrow, and it might be a different tool after that the next day. And sometimes the best tool is paper pencil. So, well, so thank you. Again, I've always appreciated getting to listen to you, like when you've spoken and the short conversations, but I appreciate getting to dive a little deeper, and hopefully, my dad and anyone else listening is enriched by the AI conversation. So, and as I mentioned, so common sense, because there are so many good resources, how can someone listening who wants to connect with you on social media or something, or common sense, how can they do that?
Well, our website at Common Sense is commonsense.org. So that is the place to begin if you want to find content, if you are a teacher, if you want to find curriculum, if you want to find AI literacy lessons or anything else like that, professional development courses, anything you want, that's at commonsense.org. If you are a parent, there is a tab up top that says for parents, right? Or the parents tab. And that has all kinds of resources for you as a parent to help you identify what is the good media that you want your kids exposed to, as well as some advice about how to handle things like social media and the lives of your kid, AI, and, all of the risks associated and the opportunities associated with all this technology. And then if you want to contact me specifically, I am found on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. So it's in Instagram. My handle is Sue at Common Sense. So that's SUEAT Common Sense, COMMONSENSE. So, and then you can find me under my name at LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, and like you said, speaking from a parent, I mean, from the educator lens, but also from the parent lens, there's so much good stuff. Even if you're listening to this and you're not in education, but you've got kids, that go there, because and just constantly growing. There's so much good stuff on there. So Sue, thank you. Once again, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you. I hope to see you soon. Will you be at Q?
I will be at Q.
I will see you. I will see you in about a month. We are recording this mid-February, and mid-March, I will see you in Palm Springs at Spring Q 2026, powered by Cali. So shout out to...
Brent.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everyone, thanks for listening. Dad, thanks for listening. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe in wherever you find your podcasts. You can also listen directly on the podcast page at brentgoley.com. And until next time, have a good one.
Take care.